cases over 30%. People are really stressed very sorely economically. Housing right now used to be 21% of median income. Now it's 42%. Real wages are down, rents are up, the cost of housing is up, homes, childcare is up. Right now, childcare is used to be 7% of the family budget. Now it's 24%. I want to return to Congress so that I can represent the economic needs of the people, to stand up and speak out, to move away from war and start taking care of things here at home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Diemer. You can leave the mic on.
Hello. Check. Is that what? Hello. Mike? Yep. Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thanks, League of Women, and hello, everyone. My name is Diemer, and I am your Democrat running for Congress. I was your 2022 candidate, and we are back in 2024. And so I know we got a couple minutes. I just got a couple minutes, but I want to just echo everything Dennis said. Yes to that. But everything is higher. You know, the economy is making it harder for families. The groceries are more expensive. But how do we fix that? We have to make Congress work again. And it all starts with the incentives for Congress. If a congressman is taking money from corporations, millionaires, billionaires, super PACs, lobbyists, and they can go straight from their Congress job into lobbying positions or boards of corporations, then who are they working for? Are they working for the people? We have something called Issue 1 in November to make sure that gerrymandering gets fixed in the state so that we can get Congress, state and federal, working for the people again. We see what happens when the incentives are not aligned, but how do we fix that in Congress? We have to make Congress work again and realign those incentives so big money is out. I use this example quite a bit. Elon Musk. It was rumored that he pledged $45 million a month to the Trump campaign. Now, if you're an average person making $70,000 a year, that's equivalent to $12 a month. Let me say that again. Elon Musk, $45 million a month is someone who makes $70,000 a year, $12 a month. It's a Netflix subscription. This is what's happening in Congress and in politics right now. People with a lot of money, corporations with a lot of money are putting their thumbs on the scale. And we got to fix that. Sorry. Oh, wait. I held the wrong one. Wrong one. But anyway, thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. We'll alternate who starts with questions. Both candidates will answer all the questions, so you can hear their answers. Both candidates are running for the U.S. House, where there's a lot of different people, a lot of different views, a lot of polarization. So we have a question about compromise and how people could get some of their strategies done. So I'd like to start with Mr. Diemer answering. In today's polarized political climate, what strategies would you use to work across party lines and build consensus on key issues?
Thank you for that. Right now, we are always, in this campaign, we are working across party lines. Look, I always give the example that I have a lot of Republicans in my family, I think a lot of other people too. It's when communication breaks down is when we start having problems. Are you listening to other people? Are their ideas valid? Are they putting out really ideas that are going to help our constituency, Ohio 7, and how are you going to work with them? And that's what you have to do is you have to listen to other people, make sure that they're in the fold, and make sure that you're advocating on behalf of the people. Again, make Congress work again. Let's get the big money out of there. Let's bring it back to the people. Let's make it fair districts. And then let's start working on behalf of the people. But I also want to say compromise is, you're not always compromising, right? We are also fighting for our ideas. With abortion rights, is there a compromise there, or should that be between a woman and her doctor? I would say that there's no compromise. It's between a woman and her doctor. So on things that we are going to compromise on and we can't compromise on, absolutely. I have done that. I do it in my family. I do it on a day-to-day basis. I am out there knocking doors and listening to everybody in Ohio 7th District. But then again, we have to understand where our values are from. What's our basis? And some things we want to make sure that we're fighting for. Anti-gerrymandering, making Congress work again, banning stock trading, and making sure a woman and her doctor are the only people in that room. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kucinich, how do you plan to ensure the needs of our District 7 are addressed despite the gridlock in Congress?
The polarization that we have today in America is intensified by what happens in Washington, D.C. Two political parties are fighting each other. And as a result, that kind of polarization inevitably leads to conflict, not only political, but to a mindset which takes us into war. I think we need to check this moment right now. We're on the verge of World War III. If there's anybody who doesn't understand that, they're not paying attention. And it comes from polarized thinking. Is war inevitable? No, peace is inevitable. But in order to get to that point, you have to change the way that people think. That's one of the reasons why I proposed a cabinet level Department of Peace, so that not that government needs another agency, but what government needs is to change its focus in a way that it communicates with people. I'm running as an independent because my party that I used to belong to, the Democratic Party, stands for war. I want that to sink in. You can shake your head, but I have to tell you, I've been there. I led the effort again. You're looking at the one person here who actually led the effort against the Iraq War. You may not be aware of that, but I organized Democrats. The party's changed. But am I criticizing it as a party in and of itself? No. I have the ability to bring people together. I can work with Republicans. I can work with Democrats. Representative Smith, when you were serving, I worked with Republicans, and we ended up getting the Parma Veterans Hospital here as a result. I worked with Republicans, and we got improvements to the West Creek area. I worked with Republicans, and we were able to save a steel mill in Cleveland. And so I've been there. I have the capacity to do that, but now it becomes urgent to have someone who's tested and able to be able to communicate across party lines, who doesn't polarize, who isn't interested in trying to one-up anybody, but who really believes in peace and practices it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next question is about District 7. District 7 is pretty big. It winds its way from the lake to pretty far south. It's probably an example of gerrymandering, and we all have an additional issue on the ballot, issue 1, which would set up a commission after a nonpartisan commission after a census to adjust party district lines. So I'd like to ask Mr. Kucinich and Mr. Diemer what their position is on issue 1.
Well, it's an easy one for me because I was gerrymandered out of Congress by the Democrats. How did that happen? Because I opposed the Obama administration's war against Libya. The district was drawn, by the way, from Cleveland all the way to Toledo, 130 miles, 130 miles long, 2 miles wide. Now, it was done for one reason only, to try to determine and to silence the voice that stood for peace. I am for issue 1, of course. We need to take the politics out of gerrymandering and let citizens decide. And I salute the League of Women Voters for leading on that. But let's face it, I mean, as someone who understands it, who's seen a line drawn just so I couldn't be in a certain district. When someone is in a position of political influence, the politicians, they get their pen and they draw, well, where's so-and-so? Oh, I think we'll go this way instead of that way. I mean, it's a game that's played. It's aimed at disenfranchising people. We used to have 4 congressional representatives in Cuyahoga County. Now we've got basically 1.5. So what I want to say is that I am not just in favor of what the League of Women Voters has done with issue 1, but I know how gerrymandering works. I know how it hurts people. And I'm here to say that, I can represent people wherever they live, but in this case, the people ought to be able to have a say in it. And this gerrymandering has really been abused. It's been taken in Ohio to give the Republican Party a commanding control. And that's not so much a comment of criticism of the Republican Party as it is that the Democratic Party was more than happy to run a certain agenda that didn't really respect the broad-based needs of people to have representation. They just wanted to preserve a couple of seats at the expense of everything else. So go for it, League of Women Voters. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diemer, issue 1.
For it.
Thank you. This is very specific questions come in from the audience. And it's asking about senior citizens on a fixed income with and what can be done for seniors on a fixed income with property taxes. Now, property taxes are generally leveled at the state, so I'm not sure that this question is really applicable with regard to property taxes, but nonetheless, people on fixed incomes are facing a lot of challenges. So, Mr. Diemer, could you address that question?
This is actually one of my favorite topics. Like, that doesn't sound right. This is a very big topic to talk about. Look, because we see this property taxes hurting people all over the state. So I lived in Gordon Village before I moved to Gordon Square before I moved to Bay Village, and Gordon Square, as you know, has a lot of new developments, and we have people in Gordon Square that have houses, that have raised kids there, retired there, or living there, that can't afford to be there anymore because a condominium that's worth now $500,000-$600,000 now boosts their prices of their property up because now it's prime real estate, and now people are having to sell their house and move. I have a friend in Bay Village that happens to be on the lake. Now everybody says, "Oh, lake house," but this is third generation on the lake, and now had to sell their house because they can't afford the property taxes. This is something that is hurting families, hurting generational wealth. And what could we do about it? Now, again, you're right. This is a state issue. But I've heard other things, like for example, in California, you pay the property tax that when you buy the house. I think the same thing in Florida, if I'm correct. You buy the house, and then when it transfers to another person, then your taxes are readjusted. And if it doesn't, you pay the same property tax. And so there's different ways that this can be structured, but this is really hurting generational wealth, hurting seniors, especially people on a fixed income, and it has to absolutely change. So my position is obvious. This has to change. We've got to protect people's houses.
Thank you. Mr. Kucinich?
Actually, this is a federal issue, and I'm going to explain to you why. How many of you in this room have received in the mail over the last year a communication, if you own a home, asking you if you'd be interested in selling your home? Anybody? Look around. I mean, there's just in this small room, there's plenty of people who raise their hands to say yes. We have been inundated with efforts to buy our homes. Now, who's trying to buy them? Generally, it leads back to hedge funds, to companies in capital markets, Wall Street. Got to go back. Wall Street, in 12 years ago, they began, actually, yeah, it was 14 years ago. They started to inflate the value of housing so they could capitalize on it and with investments. They went in Cleveland and sold no-doc, low-doc loans to people they knew couldn't pay. They collateralized those loans and built them into investment instruments, which they then fractionated and built the economy up. They cashed in, stuck the government when the economy fell, which was going to, and millions of Americans lost their homes. So let me tell you what's happening now. Wall Street's pushing a game to grab homes everywhere and to be able to basically control the housing market. And what are they doing as a result? Right now, the prices of housing going up, price of rent then goes up. We have to break up the monopolies that are buying into housing. This is a scam that's being run by Wall Street. And I'm the one to do it because I led the effort in investigating Wall Street. The subprime meltdown made all those Wall Street guys get up and have to raise their right hand and lie to the people about how it happened. And I came up with proposals to keep people in their homes. We need to help people keep in their homes. And we need to make sure that seniors have an increased homestead exemption. And we need to make sure that property taxes, just like California, are flattened on a year-to-year increase so people can stay in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diemer?
That was the first one to go.
And Mr. Kucinich. Relating to the geographic area that District 7 covers, which includes a very diverse range of communities. It's on the lake, some are urban, some are suburban, a lot of different cultural perspectives. How are you going to ensure that you represent the interests of all these different folks?
Actually, it's not that difficult. And here's what one does when one is a congressman. First, you have to be present with the people. Now, just in this campaign, I've had over 180 stops throughout the district and going and being in touch with people and hearing what they have to say. And when you do that on a regular basis, you really get a feeling of what people want. It's called the House of Representatives. And so you try to represent the people who are there. So having been familiar with a district that goes from, as you pointed out, Ms. Smith, from Rocky River south to Millersburg in Holmes County, it is a diverse district, but there is an underlying concern that people have about the economy, about endless wars, about the rising deficits, about the erosion of their personal freedoms. Their constitutional freedoms are under attack right now. Our First Amendment right to free speech, to be free of censorship, is under attack. Our ability to be able to have the government out of our personal lives, including whether a woman's choice, that's under attack. The ability to be able to have the government not have the right to free search and seizure, a violation of our Fourth Amendment rights. It's happening, and Congress actually voted to continue that and voted against an amendment that would have required a warrant to be able to search people. We are losing our constitutional rights. So I am in touch with people in the district. And as a member of Congress, last time I had an office in Parma, I had an office in Lakewood, and this time I would have an office in Parma, an office in Medina, and an office in Worcester in Wayne County, because they've really been, I feel, been deprived of that kind of opportunity for a congressional reach out. But I know how to make government work, and be assured, government already is working. The question is, who's it working for? And I try to make it work for that the person in the district who's paying their taxes, trying to raise a family, trying to hold on despite this economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diemer, how would you handle this diverse district?
It is diverse. And Mr. Kucinich says it's easy. It isn't easy. I want to stress that, everybody. It isn't easy. It isn't easy from this district going to Solon all the way to Bay Village and down to Holmes County. Now, it doesn't include Millersburg, by the way, but it does go down to Holmes County. There is tens of thousands Arab Muslims. We have tens of thousands Jewish Americans. We have Amish. We have farmers. We have industry. We have places like Brook Park. We have Smuckers. With all of those converging interests, you do need somebody to show up. And Mr. Kucinich is absolutely right. You have to show up and you have to talk. But this is what gerrymandering does. And I just want to bring it back to issue one. This is drawn in a way to have these difficulties where all of these different people are lumped into one district to make sure that it's leaning one way or the other, and where you're trying to figure out how to legislate for the people. And what we need to do is we need to fix gerrymandering so we get some of the same demographics into it, so we can carry those ideas to Washington, D.C. Because I tell you right now, it is hard to talk to people in Worcester, to have them relate to people in Solon and in Bay Village and say that this is the same district and I'm going to represent all of those interests. And sometimes they're converging in Washington, D.C. No, it is hard. Let's say yes on issue one.
Thank you. Starting with Mr. Diemer, on the immigration. We see a lot of that on the television. Immigration reform is a key issue in Congress. What specific policies or changes would you advocate regarding border security, pathways to citizenship, and the treatment of undocumented immigrants here in Ohio?
We do need strong borders. I've been to 40 countries myself, and we do need strong borders. That's what makes a country. At the same time, we do need to make it easier for asylum seekers, and we also have for people with family here. I have a friend who is married to a Filipino woman, and when they were in the Philippines, it took them almost a year and a half, I think 18 months, 19 months to get a visa to get their kids who are American back here to Indiana where they live now. Her sister, who is a Filipino dual citizen, Filipino Australian citizen, got a visa to come see her nephews. And so we have these policies that really just don't make sense. And honestly, it discourages people from applying for citizenship the correct way. We need to make sure that this is streamlined. We need to make sure that we have a very efficient way to get people and make sure that they are coming in properly. And then we have to honor that, what America is. And the second thing is we have to start at the root of the issue. And I'm not one person that likes to start just saying all this stuff on top. We have to get to the root of the issue. When we have tariffs and restrictions and sanctions on countries like Venezuela, or if we keep meddling in places like Haiti, and we have turmoil there, you tell me one thing. What do families want? They want good places for their kids. And so are they leaving Venezuela? Are they leaving Haiti? Are they leaving places because they are like, oh, we're just gonna go there and met? No. They're going because the lights that shines around the world is still America. And they're coming here. And so what we could do is make sure that other countries have the same opportunities. And I'm not saying giving them money, but I'm saying, hey, if we stop making sure that they don't have opportunities and make sure that those places are also good places to live. That's what I want to do.
Thank you. Mr. Kucinich, what about immigration reform?
As I move throughout the 7th district and talking to people, this is one of the greatest concerns that people have about individuals coming across the border by the millions, being able to get benefits that may not be widely available to American people, and being able to do it without, in some cases, even being identified as they move into the country. There's something profoundly wrong with what's happened in America in the last few years, that the border's been open. Well, the border needs to be closed, period. And we need to return to a legal practice of immigration. My grandparents on my dad's side came over on a boat from Europe, as so many people whose ancestors came over, and they went through Ellis Island and they signed up and they came through legally. And all those people who came through legally are being put at a disadvantage by people who just come over the border. The United States of America right now is spending over $175 billion a year, resources that should go to people who already live here. As member of Congress, I intend to make sure we take care of things here at home first. We take care of the American people first. We take care of our people who need help with their housing, with their day-to-day expenses, with childcare, with education. I mean, whatever happened to making sure that America comes before all the other countries in the world? You know, I have a great deal of sympathy for people who want to come to America, but I even have more sympathy for the Americans who are struggling day to day and finding their government's attention is looking elsewhere. They're not really paying attention. It is shocking to me that members of my former party weren't really aware how deeply the American people feel about this, that they want something done to stop this movement over the border, which is going to have consequences that are unforeseen and is resulting in crime and other things happening in American cities. So yes, should we seal the border? You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diemer, what is your take on the current conflict in the Middle East? How would you work to resolve it? And I assume that refers to Israel, Lebanon, and Gaza.
I think you have to also really stress, and this goes back to a couple questions ago, what do we need somebody in this district? And this is what I said, is that we have a very diverse district. And this is not an easy district. Again, tens of thousands of Arab Muslims, tens of thousands of Jews in this district, Jewish Americans. And this is something that we have to have somebody that is going there and be on both sides and make sure that we are talking to everybody in this district. I don't know if you know, but I started a podcast with the Democratic Party. It's called Cuyahoga Today. And right after October 7th, that horrible incidents, I brought two people from the community, from each of the communities onto the show. And we talked about it. We talked about how they feel, the trauma that this brings to everybody. And it was really, what they told me is that without I just wanted to point this out, that Representative Miller, right after October 7th, said, I want to turn Gaza into a parking lot and eviscerate them. And this is a quote, by the way. How do you, as a representative, represent a diverse district like this with that kind of attitude and that kind of temperament? You don't. And what they told me is that members of the Muslim community and members of the Jewish community, both their shops were being vandalized, their people were being terrorized here in Northeast Ohio in the 7th district. Look, we need a ceasefire right now. We need to release the hostages right now. We need to de-escalate this absolutely yesterday, and it should have happened a long time ago. But somebody who's going to be in this district has to understand that this is a complex district, that is diverse, and that we have to make sure that we are keeping the peace here.
Thank you. Mr. Kucinich, the conflict in the Middle East.
America has failed in its policies in the Middle East. Our country has stood by while genocide has occurred. Our country has, instead of being a leader for peace and diplomacy, has stood by while one nation, one group of people were attacked. And instead of intervening, we basically have provided the arms to continue the attack, and then we're surprised that the war continues. I stand for the survival of Israel. I think that the more arms that we provide the Netanyahu administration, it does not help to reach a peace agreement. What we are doing right now fuels the war and could fuel the destruction of Israel. And for those who love Israel, I love Israel, but the destruction of Israel is at hand if we don't find a way to stop fueling the fire with American arms. Whatever happened to diplomacy? Our State Department no longer understands diplomacy. I led the effort against war in the Congress repeatedly. I led the effort, and I know that it is possible to reach out to people. The Bible says, and we're enjoined to make peace with our brothers and sisters. We are doing that. It's as we think we just put more and more guns on the table and let them work it out. It doesn't work that way. America must be a leader for peace in the Middle East and throughout the world. America must find a way to help Israel survive and the Palestinians and the Lebanese survive. I've been to the region. I've been to Israel. I've been to Palestine. I have been to Lebanon. I've seen the destruction that occurs. And I know that we cannot continue to let that happen without a voice being raised up and say, it's time to stop. And it's time for us to take a new direction. And that's what I do when I'll get back to Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diemer, this is a question about media and things we see on our cell phones, things we see on television. And it's about how do we address what we know is disinformation and misinformation, both on websites, podcasts, advertising. Starting with Mr. Diemer.
That's a good question. That is an excellent question. Because what we're really talking about is freedom of speech. And then we're talking about people to say things and how that's amplified. I really want to turn this to two things, and I think this is where we should probably focus. The first one is algorithms in social media and how algorithms are designed and what information they're pumping to people. And algorithms absolutely have a way to bias your feeds, and then they pump certain information to certain people. And again, it could be left information, it could be right information. We have to really have a more transparent way to understand how those algorithms work, so make sure that we are not having corporate bias within our information. The second thing is I think we're going to have right now is AI. In AI, we're going to see a lot of deep fakes. We're going to see a lot of ways for people to manipulate people by copying their likeness, their voices, who they are. And we got to make a system where we are able to authenticate the individual and authenticate their own words. We saw with Taylor Swift back when GPT-4 came out. They started saying things about her. A fake video came out about her, and there is no way to authenticate that. This has to be patterns to make sure to authenticate information, fact check information, and make sure that we're also making sure that it is a way of coordinated of fact checking. Another thing that we do as well is, and I've seen talked about, is taking a lot of data and weighing the truth of it. And it's just like a voting mechanism of democracy, but with truth. They use it. I'm blanking on the word. I apologize. But a way to weight truth, so we can make sure that there's a truth score and a truth weight to said information. Anyway, we have to do something like that while not infringing on our freedom of speech. So it's a very tricky situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kucinich, people are begging Congress to do something about this disinformation and misinformation. What would you suggest?
This is a copy of a pocket constitution, which I carry with me. This one was given to me by Senator Robert Byrd, and who made sure that he stood for the Constitution every day. And I stand for the Constitution. Now, when we're talking about disinformation and misinformation, I think we have to go back to First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech. Supreme Courts have held repeatedly that the solution to misinformation and disinformation is more information. That we're in a republic where the exchange of information among people is vital. Now, the problem comes, the challenge comes, when government and big tech, big corporations come together and they decide what we can hear, what we can see, and what we can discuss. Because we're really at a point where it was almost unthinkable in America that government would work with big tech to stop certain kinds of information getting to the public or to squelch people in their opinions. We need to stand squarely for the Constitution, and someone who understands the Constitution, someone who has taken an oath many times to defend the Constitution of the United States. I take that seriously. When it comes to free speech, we have to make sure that this censorship that happens through the cooperation of government and big tech, or just by government, that it's shut down, that we reclaim our constitutional rights, that we remember what the essence of it is to be an American, and that is to be able to speak our mind.
Thank you. Mr. Diemer?
Can I have 2 minutes or 1 minute to rebuttal? And he can have the same?
Are we doing rebuttal now?
No, we're not doing.
No?
No, we're going, we got a lot of questions.
Oh, okay, cool.
And we might have more.
Because this is a very interesting conversation. I hope
it's a very interesting conversation from a question from this audience. So I encourage you to send in more, because that's the whole point of having candidates talking about policy. Mr. Kucinich, we in this room are probably all parents, grandparents, or neighbors of children in school, and we're worried. What actions should be taken to ensure the safety of children in school?
This is a prime concern, as you say. And, first of all, everything has changed. The American society has changed dramatically in the last few years, where guns are everywhere. Everywhere. It's unbelievable that we have over 400 million guns in a country of 330 to 335 million people. We have to secure our schools. And what does that mean? Well, in some cases, it's going to mean devoting more resources to having police inside the schools. I wouldn't have liked that years ago. But the lives of our children are of paramount importance. It means that schools have to have the continual drills that they've had. Do I like that? No. I want to go back to something I said before. I articulated a proposal to create a peaceful America, to have children taught from the earliest age to look at each other as equal, to look at each other as the other person, to stand for peace giving, peace sharing, mutuality. And in some ways, we have to rework our society, which is so sated with violence at all levels. We cannot expect a nonviolent society when our government is spending $1 trillion a year for a war machine, and we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year for more war, and then we tell people back home, put your guns away. Nobody's listening to that, I can guarantee you that. So our children have to be protected. More security in schools, more police. Instead of spending money on armies all over the world, we should be taking money back home, hire more police, put them in the school. If anybody who wants to do harm in a school knows that there's somebody in there that will stop them, they're unlikely to make an attempt. Thank you.
Mr. Diemer, what do you think about the epidemic, it looks like to us, of gun violence within our schools?
Well, Mr. Kucinich just says barricade, and we get more police and more barricade the doors. You ask me something?
Please continue.
Oh, okay. And the cops, you guys should pay way more than you do, by the way. You guys double the raises. But look, it's the gun laws. Can we just admit that it's the gun laws? Like, isn't that obvious? That we look, I've shot a lot growing up. And I'm a big owner of guns myself. But at the end of the day, let me give you two stories. The first one is when I was campaigning last year, a guy over in Wayne County, we were talking to him. Obviously, not going to vote for me. Had a concealed carry. He said when they passed the law that said you can just go to a store, buy a gun, and then put it in your purse without a license. He said that is absolutely crazy. And the guy was packing that day. Another story. I rode a motorcycle and I still do. I rode a motorcycle for 20 years. I went and did the course for motorcycle riding. It was basic. They told me how to get on it and get off. Pull the clutch, let off the clutch. Give it a little gas. It was so stupid. You know what it did do? It made me a hell of a better rider. So why don't we have classes? Why don't we have licenses? Why don't we have processes? Why don't we have red flag laws? Why don't we have mental health evaluations? Why don't we have all those things? But for some reason, we still say 40 million, 400 million guns in America is okay. Let's just barricade the schools. I think that we need to change the gun laws and make sure that people that are competent mentally and physically are able to get the guns. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to Mr. Kucinich to address specific ways of stopping gun violence.
I want to go back to what I talked about in terms of, yes, you should train people how to use guns, but the problem is people are misusing guns. And when you look at the bios of people who have misused guns in the worst possible way, you find out that many of them had mental problems. Mental health is an issue in this country that is seldom discussed. It's a thing that seldom is covered in health insurance policies. You can go around the big city and watch people walking the streets, and they need help. And if they get a gun, somebody might get shot. Now, we can't just address this by telling everyone, well, all we have to do is get rid of all the guns. That is not. It's first of all, it's not going to happen realistically. And secondly, and I'll tell you one of the reasons why. I'm going down to places like Medina, Wayne, and people are telling me, the hell I'm going to give up my gun because they're afraid. There's a lot of fear. And that fear causes people to say, I'm going to defend my home. I mean, you even had the vice president of the United States recently say, somebody comes in my house, they're going to get shot. Now, wait a minute. I'm talking about a different approach. I'm saying you start with education. You start educating children not to hurt each other. Start teaching people nonviolence. Violence is learned. Violence is learned. Teaching peace, nonviolence, can also be learned. So we need to start at the earliest stage. Now, does that mean we should tolerate what's going on in society? Absolutely not. But it means that we're often looking at the wrong thing when we try to say, well, how can we become less violent? And the violence is everywhere. It's domestic violence, it's spousal abuse, it's violence in the schools, it's gang violence, it's gun violence, it's racial violence, violence against gays.
Thank you.
We need to work to become a less violent country, bigger and just.
Mr. Diemer, I'd like you to answer, are there specific areas, because the question was about gun safety, are there specific areas that people could keep guns and yet still have guns safe?
I think that we do have to start with mental health. Mental health. My girlfriend is a doctor. She does research for gun violence with mental health, and she got a grant for 2 years to study it. So we've been really going down the rabbit hole with this, and mental health is an issue. It really is an issue. Half of the gun violence in the United States is from suicide or self-inflicted. That is a mental health, and we really have to start taking our health care. And I'm not just talking about mental, but physical, our hospitals. All of that has to be a priority for America. Our health is important. Mental, physical, elderly care, all of it. But it isn't people misusing guns. I mean, we also have people that are misusing guns. And again, this goes back to education and safety. It was a dad who bought his 15-year-old son, after being reported to the FBI, a gun, an AR, that he took to the school and shot his school 2 weeks ago. It was the police union that said, hey, we don't want this conceal and carry law getting passed in Ohio because we don't want to be stopping people that might be packing and we don't know. That just, who knows what's going to happen. They didn't want that to pass. It still passed. Look, there is responsible legislation and responsible things we can do. And so I don't want to throw my hands up and say there's nothing we can do. It's not the gun issue. It's not the people issue. No, there's mental health, there's education, there's laws, and there's many things that we can do to make sure that responsible gun owners have guns.
Thank you. We're going to move now to environmental policy. Most of us know when we turn on the news tonight or tomorrow morning, we're going to see a wide patch of destruction through the U.S. of a mammoth hurricane. And was that a product of global warming, of climate change? What can be done nationally? What can be done to help our nation and our state deal with climate change? I'm going to start with Mr. Kucinich.
You're right. You can just take the Cleveland area, where I think it was yesterday we had a second tornado warning within about 5 weeks. I don't remember that happening before, frankly. So we see there are changes. Now, people can debate, and there are some debates as to whether there is such a thing as climate change or not. I believe there is. I went to the Congress and I advocated capping the level of atmospheric carbon at 360 parts per million. In other words, to start to bend the curve downward of the level of concentration. I talked about changing our agricultural approach to agriculture. Now, land can be the greatest carbon sink, but we need a type of agriculture that protects the land, and I've advocated regenerative organic agriculture. Farmers can be some of the people that are most important people as agronomists who can help us capture more and more carbon through carbon sequestration, through the kinds of crops that are grown and the way agriculture is done. Certainly the kind of energy we use is a factor. Now, I'm concerned about the continued drilling for shale because I've been in the eastern part of the state, and I've seen the effects on agricultural lands. I've seen the pollution of water that goes on. And let me say that our greatest concern here as Northern Ohioans should be the protection of our water resources. We have the greatest water resource in the world here as part of the chain of Great Lakes. I as a congressman, I stop corporations from coming in and taking out our water by the tank load. And I'm fully familiar with the fact that we have to look at the runoff that goes into the western basin of Lake Erie that causes the damaging of the lake. I mean, I'm ready to take this on from every perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lot to be said about this, Mr. Diemer.
Yeah, our lake is such an amazing, the Great Lakes, just amazing place that we live. And this also goes back to housing as well. People are finding that this is a beautiful place to live, and climate is changing. I've talked to landscapers, and across the board, they said, my job is totally different. My seasons are totally different than 20 years ago. It's happening, and people are moving from California and buying houses up over here in New York, and that's also driving up the prices. And yes, we do have Airbnb and corporations as well. But this America First idea when it comes to climate is not going to work. America only and America First is not going to work. There's 1.3 billion people in China, 1.4 in India. And they are pumping out a lot of CO2. China number 2, growing fast to overtake the United States. India is going to be number 3. We have Nigeria with 300 million people expected to get up to 500 million by 2050. And so if we do not work globally on this issue, then we are not going to, it's going to affect us still. We can do everything we want. And I think we should. We should transition the way that we produce energy, the way that we consume energy. We also should be building our infrastructure, not just our high-speed rail, which I really want to get, but also, plan for the future of what happens if climate change. Are we investing in our Floridas, our Louisianas, our New York Cities, our Los Angeles to make sure that they aren't destroyed by this climate change and other places that might be affected. Or we have enough studies being done to make sure that the tornadoes aren't ripping through Ohio every other week. Making sure that we're fortified for that and plan for the worst, but at the same time, making sure that we're reaching out globally to address this issue. Because we cannot do it by ourselves. And that's when America first, America only, fails in these kind of issues.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to another place in our small blue planet. The country of Ukraine was invaded by the country of Russia, and there's a war there that's still going on. I think we would like to know the position of these candidates, starting with Mr. Diemer, on the war in Ukraine.
A sovereign nation was invaded, and we gave them defensive weapons. We have a coalition called NATO, and that, in my opinion, has kept peace around the world since World War II. And I don't want to disband that, by the way. I want to make sure that we are continuing peace around the world and working with people that are coalitions around the world to ensure peace, as well as what we talked about, climate. We have global issues that we have to address globally. And with that said, Mr. Kucinich is absolutely correct. We could escalate this into a very, very bad place. And if there is nuclear war, everything else that we spoke about right now does not matter. That cannot happen. That cannot happen. And so we need to have this balance. Ukraine, we have one of the biggest Ukrainian populations here in Parma. I just saw Ms. Sudarichko walk in, who is representative from Parma Heights, one of the biggest Ukrainian populations outside of Ukraine itself here in Ohio's 7th District. And I 100% think that Ukraine should defend itself. And that was what I was told at the beginning. At the same time, do we keep funding aggressive weapons, planes, rockets that hit Moscow? That's the aggression that is the escalation that I am worried about. So at the same time, I want to preserve NATO. I wanted to help our allies defend themselves. I want to make sure that we push back aggressors. Just because you're a big country doesn't not mean that you start taking over little countries. That is not cool. We've seen how that goes plenty of times in history. But at the same time, we do have to thread that needle. And we cannot let this escalate.
Mr. Kucinich?
Slava Ukraini. Ukraine should be free. Ukraine should have sovereignty, unquestioned. Should be able to continue to be the breadbasket of the world. Should be able to have control over its resources. Should have been given free access to the European economy, which the United States blocked. Should be able to freely choose their elected officials, which the United States overturned in 2014. The U.S. does not have clean hands here. Yet we have given $175 billion, $175 billion, to keep a war going in Ukraine that's resulted in the deaths of the flower of Ukrainian youth, 600, perhaps 600,000, another 300,000 Russians. Russia should have never invaded, but the U.S.'s plan was to long-term plan was encircle Russia. They promised not to move NATO with closer. They broke that promise. They threatened Russia. Russia went in to protect people in the Donbass and Luhansk and Donetsk. I don't sanction the death of a single person. But the U.S. did this, and they fund NATO as kind of a sock puppet. So, oh, we didn't do that. That's NATO. Baloney. The U.S. is NATO. We have to stop the charade. There was a chance for a peace agreement 2 years ago that the U.S. scuttled, sent Boris Johnson to overturn it that would have protected Ukraine's sovereignty. I've been to Ukraine a few times. I've been to Russia a few times. I understand. These are brothers and cousins who are killing each other. This is wrong. The U.S. is, you know why it's being kept going right now, the war? For political purposes. But we could stumble into World War III right now because you can't keep sending missiles towards Moscow and expect that they're not going to respond and they have more nuclear weapons than we do.
Thank you. Continuing with foreign policy and starting with Mr. Kucinich, how would you approach balancing national security interests with promoting international diplomacy? So there's national security, there's international diplomacy, economic growth with all. How can you do that?
It's not complicated. Peace ought to be our path to security. Strength through peace, not peace through strength. Peace through strength has enabled 800 bases around the world. Why? What do we need that for? That era is so far gone, and we're acting like it was 100 years ago. America must take its resources, focus on taking care of people here at home. We can all have a good life, but yet since 9/11, we've spent over $8 trillion on endless war. We've shelved diplomacy. The State Department doesn't even know what that means anymore. Their idea of diplomacy is put a gun on the table and let's talk. The world's changed. You've seen new economic groups form as a result of the United States' approach to endless war and to sanctions. You've seen BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and other countries come together. They're ready to move away from the dollar. Do you realize how serious this is? That the United States has pursued a warlike policy of aggression that is going to undermine and is undermining our economic security here at home. We must take care of things here at home first. We have enough arms to destroy the world many times over. Why do we keep building up? What is that about? What are we afraid of? What are our leaders afraid of? Or is this just kind of a game where we're being played by a military-industrial complex where their profits are going through the roof while people are drowning in debt here at home? It's time for us to end this approach. We need a new approach towards national security. And I'm the person who can help make that happen by sharing what I know with people in both parties to say, look, this isn't working. Look at what we've done. But I'll tell you right now, I would urge all of you to call the members of Congress and to call senators and say, stop this move towards World War III, because we're moving right towards the graveyards of history.
Thank you, Mr. Diemer. How would you approach balancing national security interests with promoting international diplomacy and economic growth?
I want to stress that we do have to make sure that we are focusing here and on the people here. But at the same time, a good point was brought up. You know, there are countries coalescing together and talking about alliances, Iran, Russia, China, different currencies, and moving away from the dollar. And the way that I look at this is we are always wanting to welcome certain groups into our fold, but not others. We keep pushing people away. We keep putting sanctions on certain countries while helping and doing good trade with others. And so what we're doing is our diplomacy has to come first. And I 100% agree with that. Diplomacy first, and start bringing more people into this global fold. I'm not saying, again, not to pay for things and build up, but what we have to do is stop pushing people away and saying, we're not working with you. Let's work with them. Let's make sure that we're bringing people into this global economy and making sure that their life for their citizens and those people as well are doing well. We have to make sure that we are the United States of America, and we should be the rising tide that lifts all boats, not just America first, or I'm sorry, not just America only, but all boats. And I think that we got to do this. And when we see that people coalescing and teaming up against America, like we just brought up earlier, we've stopped diplomacy on multiple times in these certain instances across the world. Why aren't we doing that? And then why aren't we making sure that people are brought into the fold?
Thank you. We'd like now to move to healthcare, because that's a concern as well for everyone in this room. How do we stay healthy? How do we keep our family healthy? We read about prescription drug prices. We know there's a horrible situation with trying to birth babies if you live in a small town. And what's the future of Medicare and Medicaid? Starting with Mr. Diemer, what are your thoughts on healthcare in your district and in America?
Healthcare for all, single payer system.
Spanish?
I wrote the bill. I held hearings all over the country. I organized over 100 members of Congress to support that bill. What did we learn when we went around this district and the country? We learned that people are finding their access to health care denied because they can't afford it. We saw senior citizens were splitting their pills in order to make their prescriptions last. We saw people not being able to afford their prescriptions. We've seen healthcare bankruptcies. People just have to go bankrupt because they can't afford the hospital bills. We have the greatest healthcare system in the world here in the United States. The irony is that many people can't access it. One of the reasons why I wrote the bill, which is called Medicare for All, is to make sure that Americans were able to enjoy the fruits of their labor, to be able to have a good life and stay healthy. With that came the hopes for a new health consciousness, to help people make choices that might help their health along the way, to help people deal with addiction, to help people deal with various diseases that might be linked to the diet. Because remember, I mean, we have serious problems in this country with morbid obesity, with cardiovascular problems that come with it, with diabetes. And so looking at that, I said, look, people should have choices of what kind of health care they get. If they want to use alternative means, they should be able to do that. They should be free to pursue that. But the government is in a position to be able to use its resources to lower the cost of health care. Does that shut out private insurance? No. People want to have private insurance, they can have that. But we need to make sure that we can have affordable health care. And we haven't done that yet. When I return to Congress, I go back to the community and meet with people and show them the path forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We're moving on now to the national budget. It's pretty big, and it seems to be passed every couple of weeks. So for these two congressmen, how would you, as one of the 435 representatives in the House, how would you ensure that District 7 needs will not be overlooked in the federal budget? Starting with Mr. Kucinich.
Well, that's why I'm running as an independent. Because if I'm elected, I'm quite likely to be the only independent in the House of Representatives with 217 Democrats, 217 Republicans, and yours truly. Now, with my experience, I know how to use that position. And I'm going to use it for the people of the 7th District. No budget is going to pass unless the concerns of people in this district are met. The concerns with respect to child care and health care and education and housing. I'm going to raise the issue. Why in the world are we spending over $1 trillion a year in military buildups? Why are we sending money all over the world? Why are we letting government reach deeply into people's private lives? I'll use that position for the people of the district. I have the experience to do that. I have the ability to speak to people on both sides of the aisle and talk about something that might be a rarity in Washington, but it's called common sense. I have the life experience to be able to say what our priorities should be. And right now, the priorities are economic. Right now, government has a responsibility to help the American people survive. We cannot be spending 50% of our disposable income on war. That is a prescription for damnation. We're ruining our country. Give the American people a chance for a good life. That's the message I'll take back to Washington if people send me there as an independent, because I can understand how Congress works. I can negotiate in Congress. I can use a position that it's up to the people to determine if they want this to be the most important congressional district in America. I can use that position on your behalf to make sure that government really does work for the people. It's always working. The question is, who's it working for? And with me, you'll make sure you're going to have somebody who sees that it's working for you.
Mr. Diemer. Federal budget.
Federal budget. So there's been a lot of proposals. And again, this is all about make Congress work again. And again, it's incentives have to align for Congress to do the thing that they need to do. And so right now, I don't think the incentives align for Congress to control the budget and make sure that we're spending efficiently and effectively. I heard different proposals from, what if the budget goes 5% over what we collect in taxes and revenue, then Congress doesn't get paid. That might be a good one to stop the one. By the way, does everybody know we put $1 trillion to the debt every 100 days? Everybody knows that? Okay. $1 trillion every 100 days goes to our debt. And right now we're spending $1 trillion a year just to service the debt that we have. $1 trillion a year. And so this is not sustainable. And so we really need to figure out like how to incentivize Congress to make sure that we spend appropriately. This is literally Congress's job. We're called the power of the purse. And apparently they don't know what that means. So get some incentives aligned. Obviously, Congress is gonna have to do that for themselves. Maybe the people with anti-gerrymandering laws, we can get proper Congress people to do that. Another thing I've been looking at is something called zero-based budgeting. And I've been enamored with this. It's about taking everything back, and this is a lot of work, taking everything back and building up from zero to make sure that we're spending our money efficiently and wisely. And especially when people or agencies like the DOD fails audits, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 5 times in a row and are misplaced trillions of dollars, there's consequences to that. When you're talking to John Stewart and the head of the DOD says, well, we don't know where the tanks and the planes are, that's an issue. That's an issue. And so, again, incentives have to align. We need to make sure that incentives align for Congress to do their job, and we have to do that by making Congress work again.
Thank you. Mr. Diemer, suppose you do get elected and they ask you, what committee do you want to serve on? Or what 2 committees do you want to serve on?
Oversight. Oversight.
Oversight committee. What does the oversight committee do?
We're like the hall monitors, I think. Hall monitors of Congress.
Okay, Mr. Kucinich. What's your experience with?
I've served on the oversight committee for 16 years. And was chair of the domestic policy subcommittee. And we investigated the subprime meltdown. We investigated tech companies which were selling cell phones, which had the ability to adversely affect the health of children, in particular, using cell phones. We investigated the effects of mercury that was being poured down the drain of dental offices, and we found that we stopped that practice through the investigation. We investigated the fact that in 1997, the Defense Department came in front of our committee and confessed to having over $1 trillion in accounts that they could not reconcile. Now, in the next Congress, if I'm in that position as an independent, I'm going to look for committee chairmanship if someone wants my vote. I'm going to make sure that this committee, that this district has someone who's not just understands how Congress works, but is able to be in a position to be of great service to the people. So what committee might that be? Well, that's going to have to be determined. But I've been on the Oversight Committee, I've been on the Education and Labor Committee. I understand, and I participate in many other committee hearings. A lot of work is done in committee. But I will say that, having been on the Government Oversight Committee, it's worth considering to return to it again, because right now the misspending that's going on in the federal government needs to be exposed, and we need to start taking care of things here at home with our tax dollars.
Thank you. We've had a variety of questions from the audience, and I thank you all for them. And I thank our candidates for their responses to the questions as well. But now it's time to hear their wrap up of tonight and to leave you with the thought of why are they interested in serving the public, and why do they feel they're qualified, and what message would they want to leave with this audience? Starting with Mr. Kucinich.
I grew up in the city of Cleveland, the oldest of 7. My parents never owned a home. They were renters. And as the family grew, we kept moving. So that by the time I was 17 years old, I lived in 21 different places, including a couple cars. Now, the poet Langston Hughes once wrote, "Life for me had been on crystal stair." I understand that, but I also understand what comes when people seize the moment. We still have those moments in America where we can take advantage of opportunities that come to us in life. And we try to create something that people think would be not possible. My life, with the help of a lot of people, has been about possibility thinking, about looking at situations where people say, well, you can't do anything about that, it's over. I was told that when I was in the city of Cleveland with respect to the Muni Light issue. People told me it's dead. What part of dead don't you understand? I was able to save an electric system for the people of Cleveland, challenging banks and utilities and even the mob because I believe that it's possible that any one person can take a stand and make a difference. And I've done that throughout my life. That was one of the reasons why I was able to help save the steel mill. That's one of the reasons why I was able to help get that veterans hospital in Parma. I look at what's possible. Peace is possible. People say right now, peace is impossible. It must be possible. If I return to Congress, I'm going to take the excitement, the passion, the knowledge, the ability, the experience, and pour it into each day of service to the people of the 7th District. And I ask you to go to Kucinich.com to assist in our efforts, because this isn't about me at all. This is about you. This is about everyone watching and everybody in this audience who wants to have a country they can call their own. And I know how to take steps to help make that happen. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diemer?
So I was also born here in Northeast Ohio, moved around quite a bit. We were on welfare growing up, and then I moved to Hawaii, and I was an executive in hospitality for 20 years abroad, and I did my MBA in Taiwan. Sold a small business, and I moved to San Diego and back to Ohio, where I started working with my community. And ever since I got back, I've always been working in the community. Every sign that went out in Cuyahoga County for abortion rights, I touched personally. I was out there knocking doors, making phone calls, and getting signatures. I am putting the work in. I put the work in 2022 when I ran for Congress the first time, and I haven't stopped ever since. Working with the party to have outreach, to communicate, to bring two sides of issues, geopolitical issues together, as well as make sure that we're fighting for issues that we all believe in. I wholeheartedly believe that unless we change the base and the incentives, then we won't get anything done. Everything we talked about here will be drowned out by big business, Citizens United, corporations' money, and lobbyists. This is why we need to say yes on issue 1. This is a first step, at least here in Ohio, to make sure that we are making fair playing fields so that the people have a voice. And when I go to Congress, I want to make sure that we are trying to make Congress work again. And that is banning congressional stock trading, so people aren't passing legislation to pad their own wallets, to make sure that we overturn Citizens United, to make sure that we have a new system. Hopefully we can have a new system of campaign finance reform that is publicly funded, so that we can stop the pipeline from Congress to lobbyists, Congress to corporate boards. And if we can make Congress work again, and we can pass anti-gerrymandering around the country, then the people will have their voice. And I have the experience of making sure incentives align within business and within my community to make sure that we are moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like the audience, please, to thank both candidates for their thoughtful answers to the questions.